Today, we're talking about if the Chicago Bulls will be buyers, sellers, or neither at this upcoming NBA trade deadline. And so before we go ahead and we jump into it, I first want to remind you to slam dunk on that subscribe button, just like Modest Bazelis slam dunks in games. And so in exchange for slamming on that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Chicago Bulls. And so make sure that you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Chicago Bulls Insider family as we talk nothing but Chicago Bulls basketball. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump into it as we are talking about what direction the Chicago Bulls might take at this upcoming NBA trade deadline. And so got a chance to see this article on ESPN.com. This is written by Bobby Marks. And so within this article, he's talking about all 30 teams and he's got them into tiers. And so for the Chicago Bulls, he has them in the tier of deal makers. And so, here are the things that he mentions with the Chicago Bulls. And so the first one being that the Bulls could let things play out this season, which means that they would fall under the neither category. And so, I think that this is a real possibility that the Chicago Bulls could let things play out because they have got onto a little bit of a rhythm here, especially when they just came off this 4-game winning streak, before they got beat by the Los Angeles Lakers. But they've been picking it up over the last month here, and they've been making ground here in the Eastern Conference. And so I could see where the front office would go ahead, see what they have, and then try to figure some things out this summer, even though those expiring contracts are coming off the book, but maybe that maybe gives them some more clarity as far as how they want to build around their young pieces. And I could say that this could be a legit option because prior to moving Zach LaVine last season, the Chicago Bulls had 3 straight NBA trade deadlines in which they didn't make a trade. So them standing pat is a real possibility. And so the next thing that the Chicago Bulls could do is they could be either a buyer or a seller, and so make a trade or a little move here that would actually get them a piece for the right now, but they could set themselves up to still be big players here in free agency. And so, here's what's listed. And so I like the fact that it starts off with just the top names in the free agency class. You have LeBron James, James Harden, Norman Powell, Draymond Green, Zach LaVine, Tobias Harris. Those are some of the bigger names at the top of the class. And so you notice that those players are a bit older. I don't think that they are going to fit the timeline of the Chicago Bulls as it mentions, but I think that the key here is restricted free agents. I think that that is really where the Chicago Bulls would want to make a play in this upcoming free agency this summer, because I do think that, look, if you can throw out enough money and maybe outbid, the Detroit Pistons for, a Jalen Duren, I'd say you would go with that. Walker Kessler as well from the Utah Jazz, Mark Williams, Benedict Mathurin. These are all young players that I think certainly would fit the Chicago Bulls timeline. And also, too, they've got that experience. And that's something that AK has talked about, wanting to add younger players with experience to continue to grow this roster. And so I could see that the Bulls could maybe want to make maybe a move here, but still set themselves up to be big players here in restricted free agency. And so that is a possibility. And then next, I wanted to talk about just really what are the biggest trade chips for the Chicago Bulls. And so we're going to be looking at players that are on contracts. We're also going to be looking at players that are expiring. And so I have 2 players for each category. And then we're going to talk at the end just what direction I think the Bulls are going to go as far as being just a buyer, seller, or are they standing pat. And so, starting with the players that are expiring, I think that out of all the players that are expiring, there's 2 players that are the biggest trade chips for the Chicago Bulls. And I think it's going to be Ayo Dosunmu and Coby White. And so I think that when you look at Coby White and Ayo Dosunmu, those are the players that I think that teams immediately would want to add and really feel like that they could be an impact for them and perhaps push them over the top. And so one of the things that's mentioned towards the end of this article with the Chicago Bulls is that ESPN asked team executives which of the 7 players had the most trade appeal. And the anonymous answer was Ayo Dosunmu. And so it talks about, the fact that Ayo is having a career high in points, field goal percentage, 3-point percentage as well, and that the team that would be trading for him is going to get his bird rights, which allows them to go ahead and exceed the salary cap in a new contract. And so, look, I do think that with Ayo Dosunmu, he might have passed Coby White as far as being the biggest trade piece here for the Chicago Bulls. And let me be clear too, and I've said this on numerous videos, like I would love to keep both Ayo and Coby White, but I think that just the reality of the matter here is that the Bulls are going to have to make a decision, because Coby White, if he's looking, to make, into that 25, 30 million or whatever that is that he's looking for in free agency, and then you have Ayo Dosunmu as well, that's a lot of money that you've invested into your backcourt, and you still need to figure some things out to go in your front court. And you have to say to yourself, okay, was it enough to push this team further than it has been in the past? And I would say it's not necessarily, the best answer for the Bulls if they're looking for the long term here. And so, I think that out of the two, if they're going to keep one or the other, maybe it might be Ayo Dosunmu, because for him, maybe he's going to not cost the Bulls, the most amount in this upcoming new contract negotiation versus the Coby White situation, going to cost you a little bit more. And so with Ayo, he's a guy that can defend for you at a high level. And then also too, he's a guy that can be a point guard. He can also play off ball too as well. So he's a terrific combo guard, that's excellent on the defensive end. And so I could see a lot of teams wanting to trade for that. Again, too, just looking at the fact that when you get into the new contract situation, probably not going to cost you as much as it would for Coby White. And so with Coby White, I could see that he's still very much a big trade chip here for the Chicago Bulls as far as being an expiring, because he's a guy that's getting buckets. And I know he's been struggling with the turnovers, but when you look at Coby White and what he's doing as far as his field goal percentages and everything else, like they've actually started to rise back up, because last season he finished at 37%. And he's back up to 37%. Like quietly, he's back to where he was a season ago. And then also, too, his field goal percentage is actually up by a little bit. It's 45.7 versus the 45.3 a season ago. And so he's getting into a nice rhythm. I know he's been struggling with the turnovers and everything else, but it's starting to come together. And I really do think that now he's starting to pick it up from these calf injuries and things like that. And so he's at 19 points a game, slightly under what he did a season ago at 20.4. And also too, his assist, he's at 4.7 assists. His best in his career was 5.1, and that's better than what he did a season ago with that 4.7. And so again, quietly, Coby White is picking up some steam this season. And so I could see that teams could be more interested as time goes along, as we move to that NBA trade deadline. And so that leads me to the next point. With the players that are under contract, I think that it comes down to two. It's Jalen Smith and Tre Jones. And so with Jalen Smith, I think that, look, I've definitely liked what I'm seeing from him this season. I'm liking the fact that he is almost averaging a double-double, and so 9.8 points at 6.9 rebounds a game. And so, he's really getting it done as far as not only scoring the basketball, but also to getting the rebounds as well. And then also, I think that he's done a great job with the block shots as well. And so he's at 0.8. So he's been there before in his career, which is the third best or fourth best in his career. So he was averaging a block a game there for the Pacers in the 21-22 season. And so, I think that continues to go up. And I think that with Jalen Smith, he has shown that he can either start for you or come off the bench. And so I think that is something that a lot of teams are going to be really interested in, because if you have, a playoff team, or you have a team that you feel like can go to the championship, look, there's going to be situations where you might need to go out there and you might need to start a different lineup. There's going to be injuries and things like that can happen as well. And I think that Jalen Smith has shown his versatility, and that he can play in multiple lineups. He can play with, guards that are going to lob, and if you want to run and things like that, he can play that style of ball for you too. And so he's so versatile. I think he would be a terrific fit for a lot of teams. And so I could see teams being interested there. And you're talking about being on a cost-efficient contract. And same with Tre Jones. I think that Tre Jones, he's done a great job. I think that with Tre Jones, there are a lot of teams that would want him. Much like Ayo, you're looking at a player that still defends, I think, at a high level. I think he's very underrated as a defender. You're talking about a true point guard as far as just making, terrific passes, setting teammates up, understanding spacing and everything else. Like, he's a guy that is going to make those high level basketball IQ plays. And you want that, especially if you are getting deep into the playoffs, you're trying to make a serious run. Those mistakes count in those games. And so I think that you would certainly want to get a guy like Tre Jones. And so I could see the buzz picking up for both of those players who are on team friendly deals. And so for me, that leads me to the last part of this thing. Do the Bulls buy, sell, or stand pat? And so I don't think that the Bulls necessarily stand pat. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. And I think that the Bulls are not going to necessarily just sell off pieces either. I think that it's going to be a little bit of a buy or a sell here. Now, I don't think that they are going to make any type of move for like a big name. So I don't think that they're going to be making a move for like a Zion, Anthony Davis or anything like that. I don't necessarily believe that they make a move for like a Sabonis either, right? Like a name that it's like, okay, it's a solid name and maybe, somebody that helps you, maybe immediately right now, but just doesn't necessarily fit your timeline. I think that they're going to try to maybe make a move for, maybe a younger piece that has shown some promise in this league, and that they're going to try to set themselves up for something, I think, in free agency. And I say that because I believe AK had mentioned that as far as just having some financial flexibility. And so let's see what the Bulls do. I could see them making a move for, an Eve Missy. I could see like a Jonathan Kuminga type of deal, something like that. Like, I could see the Bulls trying to do something that fits their timeline and them still trying to have some type of financial flexibility to try to make some moves here in free agency. Again, talking about that restricted free agency, I think that that is going to be key for the Chicago Bulls, along with the NBA draft, because I don't necessarily see them in situations too where they're going to just go ahead and they're going to take on bad money. Like, I think that that's another thing that I don't see the Chicago Bulls doing, is taking over some bad money to get some picks. I don't see that happening for this team. And so let's see what they want, because there is the reports that they're looking for, some first round picks that are unprotected here for Coby White, or a first round pick. And so let's see what happens, with the Chicago Bulls, and if they are able to get their asking price, with him or any of these players that, reportedly that they have some interest in possibly moving. And so anyway, you guys let me know in the comments here, what do you think with the Bulls? Do they buy? Do they sell, or do they stand pat? So remember, if you're selling off pieces, you are essentially just moving players, getting them out the way. You're trying to clear up as much cap space as possible. You're trying to maybe get something back here that maybe goes with the timeline that you're looking for. Maybe you're buying. And so maybe you're just trying to get something in here right now, and you feel like that you're a lot closer, and you feel like that by going ahead and buying in on a major piece, that's going to go ahead and take you out of the play-in situation and maybe push you further than you've anticipated that way? Or do you go ahead and stand pat and just really keep the roster where it's at, let it play out, and see what you can do? Like, can you surprise maybe the Eastern Conference here and get out of that play-in situation, and then take a look at the pieces that you have and see what you can do this summer via the NBA draft and what financial flexibility you have there? I think that is a possibility for the Bulls too. But anyway, you guys let me know in the comments what you guys are thinking. And as we always say, look, go Bulls, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.